Hello all. This is a video to showcase the settings used for the dual trackpad use featured in my last video. Using Warframe as an example, these bindings will be uploaded for the community to use and experiment with by the time this video becomes available. You can find it under Warframe for Steam Deck 2025 within the Steam Deck community. Getting right to it, the first thing I change when setting up any bindings is how the right trackpad functions. As you can see on the screen, the right trackpad is set to as mouse, and firing your weapon is set to a press on the right trackpad. I first learned about trackpad firing after noticing Valve had this set in their Counter-Strike 2 default bindings when the game debuted. It seemed insane to me at first, but then I thought about it and figured if Valve is using it, then there has to be something to it. I gave it a shot for a couple of days, and in Counter-Strike 2, I liked it so much, it's now a permanent part of my bindings. The right trackpad is also set to activate on touch. I tried to use a press of the trackpad to activate it, but it never felt natural to me. For the left trackpad, I have that set to directional pad, and I have the different directions of the pad set to WASD to mimic a keyboard. I have sprint set to a press on the left trackpad. Similar to the right trackpad, I have the left trackpad set to activate movement on touch. For the right trackpad, the sensitivity settings are two of the most important in my setup. General sensitivity is turned down to 90%. If memory serves, the default is over 120%. This felt too high as the camera would turn incredibly fast to the point I couldn't control it. The next setting was even more important as it solved a very real problem using the right trackpad for camera control even on the Steam controller. Vertical sensitivity scale is set to 20%. The problem it solved is this. Using a Steam Deck or a Steam controller right out of the box, you'll notice that it's hard to turn the camera using the right trackpad and keep the camera on a horizontal plane. In other words, more often than not, you'll find yourself looking at the floor or the ceiling when you turn the camera. If you consciously think about it, you can force yourself to swipe or move your finger in more of a straight line to better control the camera. But get ambushed or find yourself in the middle of a firefight, move your finger with less control too quickly, and you'll find yourself looking at the floor or ceiling again. Do this at the wrong time and you're dead. Valve has provided a setting for this that adjusts how the trackpad will interpret your finger movement so you can maintain a horizontal line when turning the camera. It's the rotation setting, and it does work, but I've never found the sweet spot percentage with that setting. Changing vertical sensitivity scaling worked better for me. I'll talk more about this in the gyro part of this video as there is a distinct difference between the two. Smoothing is set to default. I never changed this setting. Vertical friction scale is set to default. Double tap duration is set to default, although changing this works great in some fighting games. Edge spin speed is set to 0. Edge spin radius is set to default, 25,000. Trigger press mouse dampening is set to off. I never use this because I no longer use the right trigger to fire as that is assigned to the right trackpad. Haptic intensity is set to low. This is great for providing tactile feedback when touching the trackpad. It's a good way to gauge movement through feedback. I tried turning this off, but it felt sterile. Doable, yes, but not preferred in my case. Mileage definitely varies. Gyro activation haptic effect is set to off. For the left trackpad, directional pad layout is set to 8-way overlap. This is so it's easier to run on diagonal paths. 4-way works great in games where you run in a straight line with very little diagonals, or if you would rather turn the camera to face where you're going as opposed to running on a diagonal. This setting can be changed to emulate an analog stick for those that prefer, but I never saw the point of it when I'm trying to get away from the analog. As mentioned above, I have requires click setting turned off. What this means is in order for you to start moving using the left trackpad, it will only work if you click the pad. This is on by default. I tried it, it sucked. So I always turn this setting off so touch is used instead. Dead zones are set to default, 10,000, but depending on the game, I'll lower this setting as needed. Dead zones are never increased, only decreased for my needs. Outer ring command radius is set to default, 25,000. This setting has great potential though. What it does is you can assign a function to the outer ring of the trackpad. For example, if you slide your finger up a bit on the trackpad, it will cause your character to walk. But if you slide your finger up to the edge of the trackpad, it will cause your character to sprint. I experimented with this a lot on the Steam controller, but ultimately stopped using it because it wasn't consistent. It was awesome when it worked though. The 25,000 value is a bit like a divider for the trackpad. Lowering or increasing the number determines how much or how little movement your thumb on the trackpad is required for the function to change from a walk to a run using the same example as above. Outer ring command invert. Imagine the walk sprint example just mentioned, but reverse it. Slightly touch the trackpad and your character will sprint. Touch the trackpad towards the edge and your character will walk. Haptic intensity override is set to use activator settings. For the gyro controls, this is where vertical sensitivity scale change to 20% comes into play. If you make that change on the right trackpad, you can use the gyroscope to make up for it here. Changing vertical sensitivity scaling helps prevent your camera from looking up or down unintentionally. You can still move the camera up or down with the trackpad, but it's slower, more deliberate, making it easier to control, but hazardous in a fight. Using the gyro to look up and down is faster and provides better control, as it's more intuitive to tilt the controller or the Steam Deck. A similar principle applies to using a mouse, as it's far easier to move a mouse quickly and accurately using your arm or wrist as opposed to moving an analog stick with your thumb. The alternative is, if you would rather turn off gyro controls, then you would keep vertical sensitivity scaling at 100%, but change the rotation setting. As mentioned above, the rotation setting is key to maintaining a horizontal line when quickly swiping on the trackpad. Setting the correct percentage for your playstyle eliminates the need to change vertical sensitivity scaling and using gyro controls for looking up or down. Because I haven't found the correct percentage for this setting, I don't use it yet, but others have found great use for it, so give it a try. Gyro controls are set to as mouse, but you can use the setting gyro to mouse beta as well, as it feels a bit more accurate than as mouse. But being a beta, sometimes it can be a bit wonky. Gyro sensitivity is set to 100%. Vertical sensitivity scale is set to 100%. Gyro controls are set to activate on touch of the right trackpad, but this can be changed to any button, analog stick, or trigger on the Steam Deck. When the right trackpad isn't being touched, gyro controls are off. That's pretty much it. Over the years, I've talked to other deck users that have come up with some really amazing control schemes using the trackpads and analogs. Flick stick is another method that's incredible, but one I've never quite mastered setting up. You can really get bonkers with Steam input once you start using action sets and virtual menus. It's almost as if Valve took the exact tools they used to code the controls for their PC games and stuffed them into Steam input for us to use. I can't thank Valve enough for this because it specifically addresses a constant problem with console-style games on PC, as well as providing a viable alternative to mouse and keyboard. Other developers know dual analog isn't good enough for any game that requires the user to hit a target fast and accurately, but they have no choice but to support them as dual analog has become a suspect standard. They've known since the days of Turok and GoldenEye on N64. Some PC gamers back then didn't understand what the fuss was about with those titles, and rightfully so, because they were playing Quake 2, Quake 3 Arena, and Unreal Tournament using mouse and keyboard. On and on, the examples are there. Unreal Tournament 3 released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. The PlayStation 3 version supported mouse and keyboard, but the 360 version didn't. It didn't matter that the 360 version looked better and ran a bit smoother. The controls were terrible, specifically because of dual analog. On PlayStation 3, however, the controls were excellent because of the mouse and keyboard support, making the game more fun to play. Resident Evil 4 didn't truly come into its own until it was released for the Wii because of superior controls. Call of Duty 3 for Wii was the ugliest version of the game, but it had the best controls of all the console versions because the motion controls were set up to mimic mouse and keyboard. Nintendo has supported gyro aiming for years because they knew that trying to aim with analog sticks is terrible. Metroid Prime included a lock-on function specifically to address the difficulty in aiming with dual analog. Play the Metroid Prime trilogy on PC via Prime Hack, and the series is elevated because those versions support proper controls. Retro Studios addressed this with the remaster of Metroid Prime on Switch, and will do it again with Joy-Con mouse controls in Metroid Prime 4. Perfect Dark 1964 on PC is the best way to play Perfect Dark, specifically because it supports proper controls. Currently, I'm still baffled that Warframe on PlayStation 5 doesn't support gyro aiming, even though the PlayStation 5 controller has a gyroscope in it. I tried to play Warframe on PlayStation 5 and it was horrible due to being stuck with dual analog controls. On the flip side though, using a PlayStation 5 controller for Warframe on Steam not only allowed me to use the gyroscope for aiming, I was able to assign as mouse functions to the trackpad on the PlayStation 5 controller and control the camera using it, as well as reassigning the fire button to a button press on the trackpad, very similar to how I use it on my Steam Deck. Being Captain Obvious, gaming is far more enjoyable when the controls are excellent. It doesn't feel as bad when you get killed in-game if it's because of great enemy AI and not because your controls are so pathetic that you couldn't hit the enemy that was standing 10 feet in front of you. But with that being said, that's it. That's all I've got for now. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. Hopefully this video will help someone, as playing a good game with terrible controls is simply no fun. Take care.
I got a message for Skulltrap. Ovania isn't your town, and their purge squad is all dead. I mean, they will be when you're all done. Keep it up.
Not too tight.